As many of you may be aware, there is quite a bit of discussion, speculation, reporting, rumoring going on right now for a September Nintendo Direct. And this is something we've discussed in various videos and live streams leading up to this event. It should come as no shock that many people are believing that a September Direct is going to happen, given that we have gotten at least one type of Direct per September every single year during the Switch era. But even more recently, we've gotten information from a credible journalist that is a known industry insider that gets things correct consistently, Jeff Grubb, who during his podcast Last of the Nintendog said that there will be an announcement for Twilight Princess and Wind Waker HD and the Metroid Prime Remaster he's been talking about during a Direct in the month of September. So it's seeming like everything we've been hoping for this year, or at least it's been rumored and discussed, will finally be announced in just a few short weeks. But many of you may still be skeptical, many of you may still find this to be a rumor that maybe shouldn't be believed. So what I want to focus on today, rather than just reporting the same thing you may have heard the last 2 days or so, is talk about why this makes sense, why this is believable, and why I am actually expecting this to legitimately be happening. That's what we're focusing on today. Now, before we jump into things, let me very quickly mention my social media. You may see a few different things here on screen. You can check that all out. It is linked in the description below. And of course, if you like what you're seeing here, you can subscribe or perhaps consider joining as a member. Alright, firstly, let's speak towards the credibility of Jeff Grubb. When it comes to talking about things Nintendo may do or different gaming companies may do, it's important to consider that if we're getting information about something before it's officially confirmed by said company, then that means those plans likely haven't been finalized yet. They are not concrete, they are subject to changing. So say for example, we get information on a particular game that may come out this year, but it's not fully finalized yet. At that point it would be a rumor that we heard through the vines or grapes or whatever you want to call it, but then it changes. Those plans change before they make the official announcement and the game doesn't come out. Does not mean that they were fed false info. They were simply fed info that ended up not being true simply because, well, plans changed. So we should take that into consideration with any rumor, no matter what, no matter how credible anyone may be. But when it comes to Jeff Grubb is a fairly cautious person when it comes to reporting things. He actually reports things. He has multiple sources. It isn't usually just the one. And he's very clear and transparent about these things, in my opinion, from what I've seen. And there is a good history here of talking about things for months before they're going to be getting announced, when there's a lot of doubt that's being built up, when it seems like it's not going to quite make sense, and then it ends up happening. The best example that comes to mind is Super Mario 3D All-Stars. Jeff Grubb talked about this back in 2020, all throughout the year, during the pandemic year, where Nintendo wasn't having directs, where Nintendo was super quiet and not giving us anything really substantial. But we had these Mario remasters that were rumored all throughout the year, which Jeff Grubb talked about on multiple occasions, about it actually happening, truly happening for the Mario 35th anniversary. And we were already in the month of August. And at that point it seemed, well, pretty much entirely unlikely. But what happened? We entered September and we got a Super Mario 35th Anniversary Direct, and they announced Super Mario 3D All-Stars, and it came out just 2 weeks later. As unbelievable as that may have seemed, given that we haven't really seen Nintendo announce something and then have it come out in just a 2-week short window beforehand, it was something that was very hard to expect, but that's what happened. And Jeff Grubb said that this game would come out and maintain that stance all throughout the year. And there are other games for sure that also were discussed. Another great example is Pikmin 3 Deluxe. And more recently, Jeff Grubb talked about how he heard that we were going to be seeing a series of smaller presentations throughout the summer, and that's what happened. We didn't get a traditional Direct. We got the Xenoblade Chronicles Direct, we got the Splatoon 3 Direct, we got the Partner Showcase, we got a couple Treehouse events, we got the Pokemon Presents, we had a few social media drops like the Bayonetta 3 trailer, and that new Kirby eShop game trailer as well. That's how things sort of shook out. So again, Jeff Grubb was proven to be a pretty reliable source of information. And the last few months, Jeff Grubb has been saying that Metroid Prime Remaster, a big boy remaster, so for some of you it may come off as more of a remake, is going to be Nintendo's big holiday release this November. And he has maintained that. And he's also said that Twilight Princess and Wind Waker HD are real things. These Legend of Zelda games are real, and Nintendo's been sitting on them for the right time for them to come out. And I believe these things do make sense to come out even perhaps this year or not too long from now. So with these potential game announcements in mind, let's go beyond the credibility of Jeff Grubb, which I feel like is quite well spoken of so far, and let's talk about just the games themselves and why they make sense. So firstly, let's talk about Twilight Princess and Wind Waker HD. These are games that came out initially on the GameCube. Twilight Princess came out on GameCube and Wii, and then they were both remastered for the Wii U. So they've been done a couple times already. The idea of them coming to Switch is taking two quality Wii U games and porting them over to Switch. Should be pretty easy to do, shouldn't take that much effort. Yes, they may have to adapt it from the Wii U style and controls to the Switch, but that's been done before, shouldn't be that tall of an order to accomplish. So the idea of seeing another set of Wii U games coming to Switch isn't really crazy because we've been getting all sorts of Wii U games all throughout the Switch era. These are the last few quality ones we're really waiting on. The only other one that comes to mind is Xenoblade Chronicles X. We've pretty much gotten almost every single quality Wii U release on the Nintendo Switch. So it makes sense for these to come, and also it makes sense for these to come because we get a Zelda release every year. During the entire Switch era, we have gotten some sort of Zelda game per calendar year. They want to maintain that brand, it seems, and just kind of keep it going, keep that discussion going. It's healthy for a constant sort of Zelda release to appeal and appease to the Zelda fan base. 2017, we had Breath of the Wild and its DLC. In 2018, we had Hyrule Warriors Definitive Edition. In 2019, we had the remake for Link's Awakening. In 2020, we had the brand new Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity spin-off that has proven to be the best-selling Warriors game yet. And then last year for 2021, we had Skyward Sword HD, another game that was rumored and discussed for many, many years that people were starting to believe would never come, and it came. It just took a while, but it did indeed come. And now for this year, Breath of the Wild 2 was initially slated for this year, but it's been delayed. So now there's a vacancy. There's an opening for these two Zelda games to come out that have supposedly been done for quite some time, which shouldn't be hard to believe considering that they were made a long time ago and they just need to be adapted somewhat for Switch. But where things get a little concerning is that we are running out of time. We're in the second half of the year. Supposedly Breath of the Wild 2 is coming out in spring of 2023, and that could mean as early as a March release to close out the fiscal year, where we usually see a lot of big games come out from Nintendo. So you would think they wouldn't want these games to come out like right beforehand, like say January or February, you would think. So from one perspective, it's almost looking like maybe that time has gone. It's now too late for Twilight Princess and Wind Waker HD. But something I want to remind you guys of, something we talked about earlier in this video, is a situation regarding Super Mario 3D All-Stars. A year where there were partner directs, we didn't have a big summer presentation, and there were these games that had been done before multiple times on previous Nintendo systems, but there was an excitement for them all throughout the year and anticipation, and they were rumored for quite some time. They happened, and they were announced 2 weeks before their release. We could be looking at a similar scenario here, where both Wind Waker and Twilight Princess will be announced as a pack together, and they may be announced in a September Direct a week or two from now, and they'll come up perhaps at the end of September. So there'll be some separation there between these games and Splatoon 3 coming out at the beginning of September, and also separation from other bigger Nintendo games such as Bayonetta 3 and Mario Rabbids published in some areas by Nintendo at the end of October. So it would kind of be in that middle area, maybe even comes out early October. There's a few weeks of a window there where it kind of makes sense. Nintendo kind of tends to ignore straight up third-party releases. There are so many people who own Switches, there can be games that come out on the same day. It's not like the GameCube era where they really had to space things out because there just weren't that many games. There's a different scenario here, and we could be seeing something similar to what happened with 3D All-Stars. That might be on the cards. Now at the same time, we don't necessarily have a major release for December. I could see them coming out in December. January though, at that point, it is starting to feel a little bit too close to a potential release for Breath of the Wild 2, unless Breath of the Wild 2 is taking even longer, which doesn't really take too much of a stretch of the imagination considering the history of Zelda delays. So we'll see on that. I'm hopeful that it does come out sooner than later because they already gave us a more specific spring release timing, and maybe we will be seeing a repeat of history here, and we will see these remasters rumored for quite some time also come out within a fairly short announcement to release window like 3D All-Stars. So it does make sense, I think, especially considering the rumors. But now let's talk about Metroid Prime Remake. This remake, considering that Nintendo's working on Metroid Prime 4, it makes sense for Nintendo to have a lead up to the release of that game. And since it is Prime 4, you may want to have other games beforehand be available on the Switch so people can get acquainted with the franchise, learn about the series, and be prepared for 4. And since it is taking such a long time, it may behoove Nintendo to be smart about their investments and focus on projects that already exist and just tweak them up a little bit so they can get a nice bang for their buck. So it makes sense to remaster or remake certain projects because they are easier to do than brand new games, and it wouldn't call that like an anti-consumer sort of method because they are working on the bigger brand new games. They're just taking a little bit longer, and they may want to have something to sort of bridge those gaps. So we see things like Skyward Sword HD, for example, or port of Bayonetta 1 and 2, or we see the remastering of Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition. So the premise of Nintendo going back and redoing the previous Metroid Prime games isn't really crazy. It makes tons of sense, actually. It should have been expected. It is expected. But it's been so long since Metroid Prime 4 was announced, even since the announcement of the restart, a lot of doubt has built up. But a number of credible people beyond Jeff Grubb have said that Metroid Prime Remake is indeed happening. Jeff Grubb has simply doubled down on it more recently and said it's coming out for this holiday. And in truth, it makes sense for there to be something else this holiday. Why? If you take a look at most of Nintendo's holidays, yes, Pokemon does usually take a spot on the holiday, but it's never just Pokemon. And currently, it's just Pokemon for November. There is Bayonetta 3, which is awesome, but also not something as major as, say, a Zelda or a Mario. And there's Mario Rabbids, which is made by Ubisoft. So I do think it makes sense to have something else during that time. And Metroid Prime Remake probably isn't going to sell 20 million copies, but it's a nice complementary title to the other games that are already coming out in October and November from Nintendo. And I believe Nintendo is trying to have a build-up leading up to Prime 4. They came out with Dread, they brought Samus back to relevance, to prominence, to the modern world, and it's the best-selling Metroid game yet, which is very special. And then they came out with the free DLC in the early part of this year, so they kept that Metroid discussion going. I think they want to keep that discussion going further, and they'll come out with this Metroid Prime Remake. And then going into next year, we'll start to see some discussion on potentially Prime 4, or perhaps the also rumored Primes 2 and 3, and then 4. Now, the idea behind Prime 2 and 3 is they're just getting more of a simplistic remaster, something more akin to how Skyward Sword HD looks. So they may not be considered substantial releases. Maybe they'll actually be treated somewhat like the way we're going to see Twilight Princess and Wind Waker treated, where they've been remastered, but that was already done. They're not significant revamps here, just relatively good ones, and they're going to be packaged together as one compilation of games that you can purchase. So we may see that at some point next year to help bridge the gap even further leading to Prime 4. The main point here is that Nintendo needs another game. Nintendo wants to continue to market the Metroid series and have games in between the major ones. And it would also help to explain what Retro Studios has been doing, because the story here that's come from a few different places, including Imran Khan, is that Retro Studios is actually working on a build of Metroid Prime. They showed Nintendo, they got the green light to make it into a full-on remake or remaster of that game, and then they were also told or asked to do Metroid Prime 4. And that's around when the restart was announced, back in early 2019. So it sort of explains for a lot of different things that have been going on. But with all those reasons in mind, on top of the rumors, it also makes sense for Metroid Prime as well. And it does make sense for there to be a Direct. I think the Direct's most important purpose, yes, will be to announce a few other little things like the Zelda games and the Metroid game to sort of fill out the last of the games that are coming out this year. but to also start talking about games to come out next year, because the only one we know about right now is Breath of the Wild 2. So they're going to need to start talking about games to come out in January, February, and beyond. Maybe Metroid Prime or the Zelda games will be coming out early next year. That's a possibility. But either way, it makes sense to expect a direct in September, especially with the Tokyo Game Show. They normally have a presentation right before Tokyo Game Show because some third parties will be featured there. And they need to announce games to come out for next year. And with these rumors of Prime and the Zelda remasters and everything I've discussed throughout this video, I think this is happening. I think it makes sense. And to be totally frank, I expect this. I will actually be a little surprised if they're not announced. Could I be wrong? For sure. It's happened before. But that's what I'm thinking. I would even call it a prediction. I'm predicting that, yes, these games are coming out relatively soon, and they're going to be announced even sooner in a September Nintendo Direct or something to that effect. Maybe it'll be like a Zelda Direct where we talk about Breath of the Wild 2 as well, and then Metroid Prime is just like some sort of social media drop. But I think they will be announced this September. That's what I think is going to happen. But what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. Anyways, everyone, this is On Just Restart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I'll see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.